My name's John Swan. I'm the founder of Save Forest Lake, and I just figured I'd come and see who the members of the Wetlands Council are, and figured down the road we might see more of each other as we're trying to fight off a landfill project up next to Forest Lake State Park and the Ammonoosuc River.
Anyone else? Okay. Moving on, status of appeals.
Good morning. Jaime Martinez from the Legal Unit. I'll be providing the legal status update for the council. One second, please. Hopefully everyone's received the updated legal status report. Should be dated 9 November 2021. And this information will be from the last time that the council met. In regards to new appeals, since the time that the council last met, received docket number 21-10 WTC Wentworth by the Sea Country Club Limited Partnership appeal. On 10/22/21, we received a notice of appeal. On 10/25/21, we issued a receipt of appeal letter, and then the next day we went ahead and updated that receipt of appeal letter. On 10/28/21, we received a letter designating Zachary Toll as the hearing officer. We also received docket number 2109 WTC Margot L. Thompson and Edward P. Thompson appeal. On August 17, 2021, we received a notice of appeal. September 17th, we received a notice of appeal. On September 20th, 21, we issued a receipt of appeal letter. And on September 29th, 21, we received a letter dated 9/28 from the Attorney General's office designating Zachary Toll as the hearing officer.
Okay, and on 2109, is the time is right. We need 20 days from the time of the appeal before we can vote to accept the appeal. I don't know if any of you noticed any problems with the appeal. I didn't. So.
I have just another question. I don't remember getting, I don't think I have a copy of that.
Paper copy.
Yeah, it was huge.
We had a little issue there was some confusion since Paul has left. This is kind of the first ones that have come in since then over how we should be sent and what we should be given. So you probably noticed that we didn't actually receive what we normally would, which would be the emails as each thing came in, and we've sort of corrected that, I think, in the process.
I have the electronic copy, but
Yes.
I was having
Right.
great difficulty. I don't know whether it's my system. I could not Zoom. I could not read a lot of it. I mean, there are parts of it that were hard to see.
Yeah. Well, I think we have that.
Well, I think it's,
issue with
I
that.
occasionally get a message that I'm supposed to do something. I can't figure out what to do.
Well,
But not always. So I did read the bulk of, I mean, the
actual
meat of
appeal.
it. The meat
Yeah.
of it.
So we're as far as that, I think from now on we'll be okay. Yep.
I suspect so.
And we should also be receiving, just as we're talking, like the issued receipt of appeal letter and the update, we should be getting those as we go along. And also say a notice of the pre-hearing conference and what the result was and a copy of that emailed to us. Or actually just emailing the reference to the copy that's stored in the PDF on our website.
Mr. Chairman, so you haven't been getting the links to any of these documents, is that what you're saying?
They went out in bulk just a few days ago.
Yeah. Okay.
We had
Well, I think we've rectified that because we have, I asked the council secretary for the list so that we can send them out directly. We didn't have a mailing list for the council, so we've got an updated mailing list, so we'll send out the links. I guess the question is, so the paper you also want paper copies?
No, we just want, we should get the links timely.
Okay, well, I heard this,
Well, we got
We got this one today.
Okay.
right, we got this. And remember, we're gonna transition hopefully soon to our new rules, okay?
Right.
But the way we have been doing it for the past years is that at the meeting, okay, we've got the paper copies that had been submitted.
Okay. Okay.
Whether they were either the appeal itself, or motions, or objections, et cetera. Okay. So there shouldn't be, well, depending on when we institute the rules, which we'll talk about a little bit later, we shouldn't have that problem because it'll all be electronic until we come to the actual hearing, in which case we'll get paper copies of the various filings at that point in time.
Okay.
So,
And then we'll make sure you get the links to everything posted.
yeah, and particularly I'm concerned about having the links to the filings and the links to the pre-hearing conference ruling or the pre-hearing conference report of the hearing officer, because that'll tell us when the hearing is going to be.
Sure.
And then we will all, sometime between when we receive that and when the hearing is, read the relevant, the relevant filings. So we'll be prepared for the hearing and also know when the hearing is coming.
Okay.
And it doesn't appear right now that we actually have any hearings coming up.
No, it does not.
Okay. Back to where we were. I think Carol made a motion to accept, or you?
No, let me, Matt did.
I will.
Okay. Move to accept. Do we have a second then?
I'll second.
Okay. Michael seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So that's been accepted, and we'll have to send out a letter noting the acceptance. The other thing you'll notice, we jumped the gun, actually our attorney jumped the gun, is that the way our current rules, the old rules we'll call it, work, following acceptance, we should ask for the hearing officer. He went ahead and asked for the hearing officer beforehand, which is actually fine. It's not gonna harm anything, so. And as far as 2110, next month's meeting, this one will be, we assume, right, that is 20 days will have passed since the filing of the appeal, so that we can accept it. We'll see. Moving on. Go.
In regards to hearings or pre-hearing conferences that are pending, nothing new to report. Inactive status letter or pending settlement withdrawal, nothing new to report. Miscellaneous, on September 27th, we delivered the certified record to the New Hampshire Supreme Court for docket number 208 or 20-08 WTC, appeal of Robert Newcomb, order received from the New Hampshire Supreme Court. In regards to docket number 21-06 WTC, Clinton and Cynthia Johnson appeal, on September 14th, we received notice from the Supreme Court that the motion to dismiss was denied and the appeal was accepted. And on October 4th, 2021, we received the New Hampshire Supreme Court order for case number 2021-0313, appeal of Clinton Johnson, requesting a copy of certified record to be submitted on or before December 3rd, 2021. For everyone's information, upon receipt of any matter before any of our councils, as they are recorded into our digital file, they are immediately uploaded into the particular council docket website, and that's verified. And then we start this process to make sure that we inform everyone and get those links out to you. So we'll have even more due diligence on that to make sure that everyone's getting those. Now that we have the email certified roster of all the members of the council, and we'll be able to get that out as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I noticed in the inactive cases, it looks like we last requested for status updates in June. So I feel like, I guess are we just gonna let these hang out, or should maybe 6 months, so maybe next month we can ask? for
Yeah,
another-
possibly next month. I have to go back and look.
I know.
Remember, these were held because, there's litigation going on
Yeah.
involving them, and the litigation was held at the Superior Courts and COVID, so.
There's just no, I guess there's no like pending item on this, so I just don't want it to languish without kind of at least letting folks know that we still have it on our docket and it's not falling through the cracks in any way.
Yeah.
I think in the if you read the status reports, and we could put that in here, but we haven't been.
I read them, I just forgot.
The content of the
Yeah, yeah.
status report, some of them may be waiting issuing a permit, or, you know, it runs the gamut. We don't put the content of the status report in here, but.
And I'm certainly not asking for that. I'm just,
Okay.
it's
I
more
just
of
wanna make
it's
sure.
more of a observation that,
Yeah.
and I can review the last status update and see where they stand, just so that we don't
Sure.
let them languish.
You know, every 6 months is basically what we've been doing in the past, is requesting a status report, so.
And I think the courts are still backlogged, that they're
Next
opening
month,
up.
right. So, and in the case of 2 of those, I think we've been getting essentially a copy with a date change every time, pretty much. So moving on to business, I guess, Sanborn.
I did just wanna,
Oh, do you have any?
I asked to just be heard regarding the legal assistant position. I just wanted to.
Oh, that's right.
Just wanted to give you an update of where we're at. So the position was posted, and we had five applicants, one of which withdrew before we did conducted the interviews. We interviewed the candidates, and we made an offer to a very qualified candidate who has declined. So we have reposted the position, and we will continue on to, so we're stuck with Jaime and I for now, but we're here to support you. And on the last issue, Mr. Chair, relative to the status reports, I just point of clarification. So the hearing officer has been following up on those. You know, I believe that's appropriate. It's not up to the clerk to follow up, or just.
Say this again.
So on the status report, so the hearing officer.
Hang on, you're talking about the 1902?
There's actually,
Right.
1902 and 1904.
Yeah.
So the hearing officer, Attorney Toll, is the one who sent out the request for the status reports. I just want.
We've always sent them out before.
You,
No, the legal assistant.
Well, the legal assistant,
Okay.
Paula sent them out, but
Okay.
we
Okay.
were the ones that decided, the council decided they wanted the status report.
okay, that's what I was asking procedurally. So if you want an update, you'll
Right,
let us know, and then we'll.
right.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify your process.
Okay, and I think that's it then for status and discussion of appeals. Are you leaving now, Amy?
Pardon?
Are you leaving at this moment?
Do you want me to leave?
No, I don't want you to leave, but I have a question for you. And maybe we'll kind of skip for just 30 seconds. Our rules are very close to being approved by JLCR. They're on the consent calendar for the 18th of November.
Okay, so you got the copy back and it said consent?
So, and I
Okay.
checked it and we're all
Okay.
fine. So my only question for you is that once they approve it, then we actually have to adopt it here at our next meeting. That's my understanding, and then we're done.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, then an adoption letter, so, correct, there'd be an adoption letter, and I have to look at the timing for, you only have a certain period of time from when the jail car votes and when you need to file the adoption letter, so
Yeah.
we'll have to check the timing of that to make sure that you have that meeting.
Well, we're assuming we'll have it time.
Okay, but I'll let you know the time frame just
Okay, well
to
then-
make sure that
then-
we're,
Yeah.
okay.
That's what all I'd like to know.
Well, that's great, that you're on the consent agenda.
Yeah. We had 5 editorial changes. Horribly to me personally is that we dropped an Oxford comma.
Oh.
and then we're gonna initiate new rules. How do those sort of rectify themselves, and at least the existing parties should be notified of the rules that they're playing under,
I
right?
think you need to discuss that with your legal counsel.
Yeah,
Okay.
and a hearing officer.
Yeah.
But there shouldn't, it should work out because of the status of what we have, where we are with these appeals. It should, I think it's gonna fall out fine at the moment. We'll see. Okay, that's the end of appeals. Next is introduction of Sanborn. I think, is that where we are?
You go ahead, Joe.
I see a familiar face there.
Yes.
Good morning, Chairman Vogel and the council. Phil Trowbridge behind the mask. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold. Nice to see you all, and it's my pleasure to introduce our new Assistant Commissioner, Mark Sanborn. He joined the department a couple months ago. Mark and I have been talking a lot about land resource management issues, and so he's up to speed with those projects, and wanted to give him a few minutes to introduce himself and get to know you all.
Sounds great. Thanks, Phil. Again, Mark Sanborn, Granite State native, born and raised. I have an inability to keep a job. I've never had a job for more than 3 years in my life, so I have a plethora of experience as a result. I've worked on Capitol Hill in DC. I've worked for a congressional member here in New Hampshire. I have worked at U.S. Department of Agriculture and Rural Development twice, including being Chief of Staff of the organization the second go around. I've worked in the Office of Policy for the U.S. Department of Transportation as part of the Secretary's policy team. I've also did a stint at the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, which is a part of DOT, doing pipeline and hazardous material safety issues. I've done a stint as HUD last year, which basically turned into giving out $9 billion worth of CARES Act funding to CDBG and homelessness grants. In the between there, I also did a stint at the New Hampshire Department of Transportation. I was their federal liaison. So I bring a plethora of experience. You know, when the governor is looking for folks to fill these jobs, you can go one of two ways. Someone who really knows that organization to which they're looking for someone to place the person, or someone who brings a lot of experience outside of that organization to bring a fresh set of eyes. I am very familiar with permitting, reg reform, grant and loan programs at both the federal and state level, so I have a very strong understanding of those programs in general and how they function. Obviously getting up to speed on the specific permitting and grant and loan programs we have here at New Hampshire. And when you have someone like Bob Scott, who has such a rich and long understanding of New Hampshire DES and the issues here, the thought was a balance of someone from the outside bringing a little bit fresh perspective. So I bring no internal agenda to New Hampshire DES other than being a resource and supporting the great work of the hardworking, mission-driven employees who are here. I think Phil could attest to this. Every time I talk, I don't ask. It's not about what they can do for me. It's what can I do for them, given my background, my experience, my relationships here and in DC. How can I make their job easier, and how can I support them? I'm a very direct person, so if I do need someone from someone, I will not hesitate to make the call. So it's more important, what can I do for them? In terms of from a policy perspective, right before this job, I was the governor's energy advisor, so I was very involved in offshore wind. I bring that to this job as well. I'm continuing to be part of the governor's offshore wind policy team, and then wanting, obviously PFAS is a huge issue, and just really working on being, this position had been vacant for a while, just some of the issues that require that commissioner's office investment in time and attention, trying to step in as quickly as possible. I don't have, because of the one advantage of working in the number of places I've worked in, I actually don't have much of a learning curve, because generally speaking, government is pretty similar. On the Hill, we used to have an expression, in some ways, all 435 members of the House are completely different. In other ways, they're all exactly the same. So you have that general knowledge of government processes, and then you come in and figure out the intricacies and uniqueness in whichever organization you're joining, and how it's applicable there. So that's me in a nutshell, both in terms of background and approach to this job. Happy to talk about anything you all would like to talk about.
Have any particular comments, or I'm sure we'll think of things between now and some other point in time, so maybe we'll.
I'm gonna be here, so.
Okay.
Awesome, I love it.
Yeah, thank you.
No,
Yeah.
I can.
Huh?
I can see having chats at some point, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back when it's less of an intro and more, issue driven, based on what you all would like to talk about. And I do have a press conference with the congressional delegation talking about the infrastructure bill at 10:45. So not having a bunch of questions is right now isn't the worst thing for me. So I appreciate I can get upstairs and finish off my remarks before I jump in the car to Manchester. So, well, as I said to our employees, the same goes for the councils. I'm here to support you, not the other way around. So, and support the work you all are doing. So, let me know how I can do that individually or as a council as a whole. And like I said, certainly if you guys want to put together an agenda of some specific issues you all would like to talk about, and the direction DES wants to take those issues, certainly happy to come back and do that.
Okay.
Have a great rest of your day. Appreciate your time.
We're gonna give away a lot of money, so.
I know,
Well,
that's my great help.
Yes, well, that's what
Make it roll now.
in an hour, that's what I'm about to
Yes.
talk about. So
Excellent.
appreciate it.
We're gonna practice.
Yes. The key isn't that we have a lot of money; it's using the money wisely. So that's our plan.
Good.
What we're here.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Next is, ARM. I'll just also make a note here that we received over the past month or two, we received the wetlands report. That can be read. I don't know if anyone has any particular questions on that. Maybe we could hold them until we get the ARM done. And we also received the ARM annual report, which I guess if we're on the ball, we'll ask you questions about that later.
Okay,
You
perfect.
wanna
I didn't
start?
bring that report with me, but I helped write it, so I think I can help answer questions
If
or get
anybody has
back
any
answers back to you.
questions. So with that, people should open up their copies of this if they can find it. And there we go, we hope.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning. Everybody looks familiar, but I'm Lori Summer. I'm the Wetland Mitigation Coordinator here at DES, and I oversee the Aquatic Resource Mitigation Fund. I was going to give a little bit of an overview of the grant round this year, but I just want to pause to make sure you don't need like a little more of a sort of a overview of the ARM fund. I'm seeing no answers. I know, I see a lot of heads shaking. All right, everybody's familiar, ready to go. Richard, you know it. All
I
right.
guess Matt would be the most.
I'm familiar with
Matt.
Okay, okay, Matt, I wasn't sure about Mr. Boziak, but
Oh,
you're
I'm
good?
giving away a lot
Okay.
of money.
Okay.
So great, so thank you. We advertised in February the funds. There was about $1.868 million available in just the Seacoast region, so it was just the Salmon Falls, Piscataqua River area. And prior to that, Cheryl Bondi and I spent a lot of time with some outreach to really sort of advertise the funds in the Seacoast and encourage restoration projects. This was a focus also from the federal agencies, so we gave several outreach efforts, and we had some new members this year. Bill Thomas has replaced Craig Rennie, so he's the DES representative. Jennifer Gilbert over at HSCM, FEMA, she's now representing that group instead of Stephen Walker. And our federal partners, we introduced and had Caitlin Shaw from Marine Fisheries join us, as well as Kim McCabe from NRCS. So some new faces. So it was nice to have just one watershed, you know, to work on this year and get them familiar. So we advertised the pre-proposals. 10 came in by April, the end of April. We reviewed those, got comments back to folks, and got 7 full proposals submitted in the end of August. So we were really excited. Those 7 projects are what we're going to be discussing today. Just I'll point out sort of and go through some of the details. We'll go by one and then talk about them, answer any questions. I'd like to point out that we had 2 new partners, which is always exciting. We had the town of Lee come in as a new applicant, as well as the Stratford County Conservation District. So really happy to see they both coming in. So the site selection committee and the interagency review team, again, that's all the federal agencies. We met and went on the sites 2 days and sat down at the end of October and evaluated and developed the recommendations that were sent to you. I also want to point out in your packet, we got the Army Corps letter, pretty much agreeing with the decisions, which is great. It's nice to be able to bring that to you as well. So that is in your packet as well. Great. Any questions so far? Okay. So like I said, we had 1.868 million advertised, and we've had 7 projects in front of us. So we'll go one by one. I'll give a brief description. Please interrupt me if you have questions, or save them to the end. So we'll go first over in Rochester to the Champlain Forest Edition. This is a project proposed by the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests. SPNF is going to be holding the fee on this parcel, with LCHIP holding the conservation restrictions. So they're requesting $110,000 to protect a 122-acre parcel, which is adjacent to the Forest Society's Champlain Forest. So this will result in over 300 acres of contiguous land. This, if you're familiar with Rochester, it's right across from the Skyhaven Airport. So it's got a nice already trailhead to the Champlain Forest, so this adds to it. It has been cut here and there, like the last 10 years, and then a recent cut in the last 2 years. But it's in really nice habitat with 14 acres of wetlands. There's some perennial streams, and it's got Gonick Hill, which is a focus point, highest point in Rochester. So the recommendation is to fully fund this parcel acquisition with the conservation restrictions held by LCHIP. The management, there are some existing woods trails on the parcel, so those will still be used for walking. You know, there's some trails already on the Champlain Forest. The Forest Society also has some thoughts of managing a 8-acre field for early successional habitat. So,
I have a
right,
question.
sure.
So I noticed, kind of in comparing the recommendations for this slate, so this one, for example, funds the fee purchase with a conservation restriction held by Hellship. There's no details as to the easement language. Further on, there's one for maybe the Lamprey River here.
Right.
Where we get into details about the easement shall include like specific provisions, and then you just
Right.
mentioned that on this one there's some trails, so I guess why the difference, and I assume that each conservation restriction or easement is tailored to the specifics of that piece of property, but why are we seeing some details and not other details, excuse me?
Sure, so some of those details were specific to members of the site selection committee or the federal agencies, really feeling that strongly that those kind of details needed to be in the deed. And typically, we have a standard deed that we use, so applicants know that, and they know that for significant wetlands, for vernal pools, and, you know, certain resources, aquatic resources, there's at least 100-foot no-cut buffer. But, yeah, when we're on the site, these are some of the, you know, details that we have to kind of pay attention to, and carry on, so we include them in your recommendations. So if you don't see any specifics, then it's typically we're falling back to the standard template.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, Deb.
Lori, is there parking access other than the one that belongs to the Champlain Forest proper to get to those trails, or do people
So
just
that's
park
right
on
off
the
of
street, or-
108, I think that is, for Skyhaven Airport, so it's got a kiosk, it's right there, so that would be still the main parking area.
It doesn't look like any of those trails are connected over, I could tell.
So I don't think this was meant to be a trail map, what you're
Oh,
looking
okay.
at.
Okay, it's just whatever's on
But
there.
at the, what I'm gonna call the northeast end of this, proposed addition, isn't that fronting on a road? It looks like, well, it must be, cause there's a log landing.
So you see the
Yeah.
P, so you have trails that come in, so the parking area is where the P is, and then, you know, there's a trail that comes into the addition. So Forest Society holds the Champlain Forest, so they're gonna just be now managing both parcels.
Well, yeah, my point is, do they plan, or perhaps they should plan for some parking at the other end there, or is it gonna be?
That's not,
You don't know, it's
that's
gonna be
not
just-
what they're planning, right?
So it'll just be blocked off then, and people being able to go, or they can walk, I guess.
So
Yes.
I don't think they're planning to invest in any kind of additional parking, since they have a nice one and people are used to the parking on 108. So they're just gonna be connecting to those trails to get to this parcel. So,
Won't people go and park there? I mean, if the trail ended there, if the logging landing ended up there in the northeast corner, which is where it shows, and the road came in, I'm assuming people will just show up and park there and walk around once the land is purchased. And I mean, this is a little bit too much of a detail, but I suppose, but it's what we've seen happen before with some of these in our town. They add something and then they don't provide any way for people to get into it.
so, as you recall, these are conservation parcels to replace lost functions and values. So the main goal for these conservation parcels is to protect the aquatic resources, so they're not being purchased to scatter a lot of trails on them. And so with an existing parking lot that the Forest Society already has, that's enough for there.
I'm just saying people will come. What I mean is people will come there and then they'll just
Yeah.
park on the side of the road and that's, we'll see
Yeah.
what happens when they do it. Maybe they won't. So, that'll be Spinners' problem, I guess.
concerns with an additional habitat being, created for wildlife that might affect the airport?
So there's no creation of habitat, it's just a protection parcel, so
Right.
there's not gonna be any changes.
Yeah, that's
And actually, the Champlain Forest, this may be too much detail that you want, but, it's probably before Matt's time, but in, 2000 maybe, improvements at the Skyhaven Airport involved wetland loss. And so they were involved with the original preserve. And there were some dams that were removed for that reason that you point out.
right.
But, there's no gonna be changes to the habitats on
Well, I
this.
just wonder if oftentimes they ask you for maybe money to help for fencing of the airport or something, or, to try and
Who would, the
avoid
forests?
any additional wildlife infringement onto the airport. I was just
They
curious.
got it's like a road,
Oh, okay.
It's 108, yeah.
And I know
Yeah.
that they already had a forest fielding next to it. I was just curious if they
Sure.
ever inquire, that's all. For
So
monies.
if you're saying fencing from arm, they would have to come back.
Back to you.
Yeah, and we wouldn't probably,
Give it.
provide funds
Yeah.
for fencing. Good question. Lee?
I have a general question about the conservation easement language. So the ones I've seen generally say that if you're gonna have forestry management activities, you have to have an approved forest management plan. And you said there had been some cutting on this property fairly recently. How often does the ARM group actually review or receive and review forestry plans for
Right.
these properties? We don't get that follow-up, so
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Excellent question. So, and people ask me that. So we have not encountered any requests for updates on the plan. So part of the package with land conservation projects is you have to submit surveys, appraisals, all the due diligence materials, including a baseline documentation report. So then that sets the stage for what area it has had done and
Right.
what forestry. And then a forestry management and stewardship plan gets submitted. And those are updated periodically, but we've never had any request on ARM funds to sort of execute the forestry.
Okay.
I know. I think, conservation organizations, and, Gretchen, you might, I don't know. So I think conservation organizations have the goal to keep these areas, in pretty much intact. They might, do some cutting for habitat management. And that's why I pointed out this field might be sort of, managed, but, I have had one, and it was recently a easement in Hooksett, McAllenstown, where it was a permittee responsible mitigation parcel that was protected, and now they're talking about some management, and that was the first one I've ever really encountered.
Any other questions from anyone? We'll look for a motion.
Do you want me to read off them?
Yeah.
I move we fully fund, if I get the language right at the very beginning, fully fund the Forest Society $110,000 for the purchase of a fee on the plus or minus 122 acre parcel named the Champlain Forest Addition with conservation restrictions to be held by Elgin.
I'll second.
Second, Carol, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on.
Thank you. So the next project's over in Lee, so this is the new partner we're excited about. It's a culvert replacement, so I pointed out how we tried to get restoration projects in this year, and it was the first time we had more restoration projects than land conservation projects, so we're really excited. Exactly. So this is Chesley Brook under Packers Falls Road, a metal pipe arch that's undersized for this stream, and it's impairing fish and wildlife passage. The town has been getting help in design, and the application materials were assisted by the University of New Hampshire folks. So we got some great assistants and partners. So this is 1,000 feet upstream from the confluence to the Oyster River. So it's the first crossing that the migratory fish encounter, so it's going to be, you know, removed to improve close to 2 miles of fish passage. And what's really exciting about this location is that it has state endangered brook lamprey, American brook lamprey, which I'm sure, Carol, you could talk about that one, and brook trout. So by replacing this with a 15-foot by 15 or 15-foot by 5 box culvert that's going to be embedded with sediment, natural sediment, they're going to be able to improve the habitat reach for these species, the endangered species. They're requesting $245,000 and bringing additional funds to the project, and they're in conversations already. They've done a lot of the design with, you know, through UNH, but they will be needing to get a permit. And UNH is planning to do the long-term monitoring on this one.
Questions, Michael?
I'm sorry.
No.
So on several of these, they're contingent on permitting.
Sure.
That struck me on this round. Has that always been the case? I tried to find this proposal years past and I have efficiently,
Right.
they got deleted, but.
I think we have in the last
Okay.
round or two, we funded probably 15 or 17 of these culvert replacements.
Yeah, I
so
assume it
it's
wasn't
very-
new, but I've never really
It's
thought about
right.
it before. I guess the sort of interesting piece would be like, what if somebody appealed one of these permits and then it came back to this body, but that was more of a sort of circle of life, I guess.
Right, I don't
Would just
know,
be delayed.
crazy things happen, but they know they need to get a permit, we talk about that, we
Yeah.
talk about the design when we're on site, we have a stream expert on our committee, and he grills them. And so, we also have this stream crossing worksheet that they pretty much prepare and fill out, and that then can go smoothly into the permit application. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Oh, super, okay.
Any other questions here? Go ahead. Yeah.
I move we fully fund the town of Lee $245,000 to replace the Chesley Brook culvert with a fully geomorphically compatible structure. The funding is contingent on receiving an NHDES wetlands permit that includes an approved monitoring plan to address measures for long-term success and adaptive management.
I've tried to keep them short.
Wow.
I really do.
We went
That was
through
a long
presentation one
structure.
year, as I remember, because we didn't think there was enough info in it.
Yeah.
The next one's long.
Second by Richard. Any further comments? This looks like a great project.
Exciting.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on.
Moving on up north a little to Milton, we've got the Jonesbrook Branch River project. It's a land conservation project proposed by the Southeast Land Trust of New Hampshire. So they plan to hold the conservation easement on this parcel. So this parcel is, it's the puzzle piece project, right? It's completely surrounded by conservation lands, which we've seen this happen over Durham, so it's really exciting. It's a little over 563 acres, and it has amazing wetlands, emergent marsh areas. 97% of the parcel is high WAP tier habitats. I think there's like 19, isn't this a bunch of vernal pools, 19 vernal pools, right? It is near 2 funded ARM projects that some of you may recall. Carl Seaman Family Charitable Trust, we funded that project, as well as a little below Mount Tenerife, which was just in 2020. So it's got 123 acres of wetlands, 19 vernal pools, just amazing. And we're proposing to fully fund $475,000 of this acquisition. It's in the Somersworth Waterworks source water protection area, so it's really scores high with that wellhead protection as well as aquifer protection. It's the puzzle piece.
So this is privately owned, it's not owned by the Somersworth Water?
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, correct. Privately owned, so they're gonna hold a conservation easement.
So what will they left to do with it? I mean, is it left for forestry and just recreation after this is done, or?
Yeah, and conservation, it was somewhat gravelled, it was a gravel owner, so he's selling it to him. So there may be, there may be opportunities down the road for some enhancement or restoration, but it's already really great turtle habitat because of the, open sandy soils next to these important wetlands and vernal pools. It's really a nice property.
Any other? Oh,
Yeah.
Carol.
I have a quick question just about the ARM funding again, and I apologize, you probably
That's
have
all right.
already explained this in another presentation, but how does the group decide that, so on this one and the prior one, it was, the money requested was twice the amount that they had for match. And the first one was, they had more match than they asked for funding.
Mhm.
How does the group determine, that the ratio is fair to tell you, why not go back to the city of Portsmouth and expect them to, at least collect half the funds versus, do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Because couldn't one group come in and say, okay, we've collected $10,000 and you pay the rest? So how do you decide whether that's a fair and equitable allotment of the funds?
No, that's a really good question. So it also kind of goes back to where these parcels are located. Land values in different communities range from low to high, and you'll see that with Rochester, Milton, and Durham. Durham land.
Well, no, I understand the difference in value. The thing is, how much effort does the matching funds have to be to, they may have to find more money. Is there like a ratio where they have to come up with at least a third of the amount, or you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Sure. So land values are a little different, and so they are coming in by August with a firm budget, which is often other funding sources.
Right.
So like LCHIP, the town, Moose Plate, there might be forest legacy funds, so they're really putting all these spaghetti strands together to make a budget work.
So you don't have a required minimum that they have to come up with?
No, so there are points assigned if they provide more match. So if there's,
okay.
a couple points extra, if you provide 30%,
Oh, okay.
Matt knows this too, you could give the answer.
Yeah.
So that, our evaluation criteria is online or I could send it to you if you're interested. That might be a good thing to kind of think about or talk about down the road if you're interested. So they have, so if there's so the problem is too, if there's pending, like $20,000 pending, and one of these funding sources falls through,
Right.
the project may not go forward, or it may take them a whole nother year to gather. So we don't question, we look at it and we look at the budget in terms of like stream crossing projects, monitoring, have they allocated enough fund for, permitting, blah, blah, blah. But land conservation ones with the partners that we typically see, like Southeast Land Trust, they know what they're doing. We recognize that if you partial fund some of these requests, it may stall it for a good year or may not go forward. These are great questions.
Do you have a rule whereby if they do lose their funding, do they get consideration for the next year? Does it, if we voted on it, and is it theirs until they completely fall through, or?
And so I have to take all of these projects individually to the governor and council for approval, so I don't do that step until I know.
Oh, okay, right.
Right.
And then what happens to the money if it falls through?
It goes back into the watershed account and we advertise it that following year. Yep.
Okay, I move we fully fund the Southeast Land Trust of New Hampshire, $475,000 to purchase a conservation easement on the plus or minus 563 acre Jonesbrook Branch River property in Milton.
No, this isn't it, Susan.
Oh, did I slide?
No, this, we're doing the portion.
No.
Sorry.
All right.
I've lost it.
Well, my pages have been going up and down on me, but I didn't think
No.
that. Okay, I think that's it.
That's it.
I second.
Lee seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Great, thank you. Now we're over in Portsmouth. The city is requesting a little over $419,000 to develop a living shoreline at North Mill Pond. And so just to put you in the setting, I don't know if folks have been in Portsmouth lately, but this is the area that's really changing pretty quickly. There's the 3S art space, you know that. I think there's this like AC hotel across the street from that. There's another complex. It's really different if you haven't been there in a while. So this site is right behind 3S art space in that hotel. So that's where we are, sort of zooming down in. And this is a living shoreline project, so pretty exciting, sort of the habitat improvement type of enhancement, creation, some restoration so it's an industrial area, it's overgrown with invasives, it's highly eroded. This would be our third living shoreline project that we funded. So if you recall, we funded Cuts Cove in Portsmouth. That Cuts Cove's a little around the corner, and then we approved, you folks funded living shoreline project at Wagon Hill Farm. And so this will be our third. We're really excited. This is an area of Tier 1 habitat because of the sensitive sort of salt marsh area. What they're proposing is to sort of enhance 0.46 acres of the shoreline, 2.27 acres wetland creation, approximately 0.41 acres of upland enhancement. So basically, if you can picture this, it's an eroded shoreline. They're going to be lining the area with the living rock. So it's got the algae, the mollusks, so they're jump starting the lower edge with the living rock. And then they'll be coming up, and all of this is designed with sea level rise in mind. So they'll be coming up with a low marsh habitat, which is lacking at this area, which will be the Spartina alterniflora, with then a core log sort of step to then high marsh, which is Spartina patens, and then also doing, treating a lot of the crazy, invasives that are out there. And this is part of a larger sort of effort that the city's doing. There's a walkway that's going to be bringing folks to this part of Portsmouth, walk around here on a pervious walkway, which will then also address some of the stormwater that's coming into the system, and then letting it branch off to some other walkway projects that they're doing. So the city really saw this as a great opportunity to mix, ecological benefits with human sort of interests. They're gonna, we're not funding, but they're gonna do sort of kiosk explanations about, living shoreline, and which is similar to like Wagon Hill. They have a really nice kiosk. And one of the things that I've learned from Wagon Hill Farm, which I think is really important to think about, is Wagon Hill Farm had a graduate student that looked at a reference site compared to the first year after the living shoreline was done at Wagon Hill, and they found that it was 85% similar to the reference site. in terms of habitat response, fisheries, you know, the rockweed and whatnot coming in. So, with a lot of the shoreline in New Hampshire armored, this is a huge kind of step to improve habitat.
Questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the invasive species management plan for the site. What practices are planned for
Sure.
treatment?
So they have an extensive planting plan, so they're gonna, you know, remove them all, and a lot of those are sort of on the upland, I think, sort of tidal buffer zone, but they're gonna get rid of, you know, I think it's like sumac and bittersweet and all the, you know, nasties, and then replant, and those would be then monitored over time for a good 5 years to, you know, make sure they're successful.
Okay, what do you mean, the removal portion is what I'm interested in particular. Do you know what the removal practices will
Right,
be?
so I'm pretty sure they're planning to cut them, and if there is some stumps, I think minimal removal of the stumps, but maybe, you know, grinding them in place, so
Okay.
then they can replace them with other habitat, you know, non-native, or native, non-invasive species.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
I have 2 questions. Is the living rock, it's already living rock, is that right?
Yes.
Is it coming from the site, or are they bringing it from somewhere else where it's being removed? How
Right.
does that work?
It's such a funny term too, living rock,
Yeah.
but that's what they call it. So some of it's just gonna be salvaged from the site.
From that site?
Yeah. So at Cuts Cove, they did this too. And so if you remember, that was that big berm, and then on the downside was the rock that met the tidal influence. They put that aside,
Okay.
you know, saved it, and then put it back, and it completely jump starts the system.
So you have to store it in a tidally
Yes.
influenced area
Exactly.
temporarily and then move it.
Right.
How are they restoring mud flat?
So that is no longer on the,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I know that little, it's hard to get,
Yeah.
that is not gonna happen. They were planning to put oyster spat, and that's not part of this funding request.
Got it.
Carol?
I just wanna clarify that my prior question was referring to this project and not the prior one. I must
Oh.
have got ahead of myself. Yeah, because this one has, the request is double the funding match and the other one was not.
Right.
There was more funding, there was more matching funds, so.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify if I confused everybody.
I hope I didn't confuse it anymore.
This one, the map on this one is nice for the project, but it's too small, like, you can't figure out where this really is in Portsmouth and such, and it almost seems like in a project like this that's much smaller, we need 2 maps. One to put it in context of the area, such as the maps we had for the storm drains. I mean, storm drain, that's a little small project, but we've got the overview, and so we can see where it goes, and then the picture
Right.
of the drain, so we can quickly.
So I have the file with me, and I had corresponded about having sort of a projector. I have my laptop, but I don't see folks brought laptops. I was thinking.
No, I'll just
I-
say, that's kind of for the future, anyway.
Sure, excellent.
Yeah, it just seems like it would be better. And second question, what is there, a sidewalk or a walkway, that gray strip that goes through this, is that the plan there?
That's the previous walkway, that's gonna be sort of connecting, you know, as you see it, there's gonna be connecting up here to, some street. There's walkway to further Market Street, I believe. There's a future connection to Green Street. I'm not familiar that much with Portsmouth, but there's another connection to the south. So this is part of
This is where
a.
it would be useful to have something that was a little bit bigger.
So that's a good question, because I asked if I should be ready for a projector. It is something I can prepare in the future if you prefer to see these maps on a screen in front of you. This time we only have 7 projects, you know, if we have another grant round with 20, it's gonna take a while. So now, maybe for next year, we can figure out whether you want these.
It's not so much the display, it would just be that if we had another picture that showed a little bit more of Portsmouth in this particular case, then we'd know where it was. Or I'd know where it was, I suppose.
Lori's right that part of Portsmouth's changing daily.
Yeah. It is.
Crazy.
It's really crazy. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay, I
Yes,
move
we're
we.
ready.
May I ask?
yeah, good question, Michael, go ahead.
So on the future costs of this thing, so I noticed like if contaminant levels exceed accepted limits, maybe you can explain that. But then also, it sounds like there's a lot of sort of like post-approval conditions that may or may not be triggered. And how are these gonna get paid for? Are these municipal expenses, or are these?
Yes, and they have submitted a application, a DES application for the work, and so that a lot of that intel came into the discussion with the applicant. So Cuts Cove in Portsmouth did do sediment analysis because of Portsmouth and the potential. So the committee felt, as well as the permit reviewer who we consulted, felt that that's probably a good, consistent kind of item that should be done and taken into consideration. So there's some other permitting issues on this that I think, Evan Lewis will be handling it. Had some questions on whether, it is something that is consistent what they permit in other areas. So we're trying to coordinate that, and that's why I think the recommendation's a little more lengthy.
Okay. And so, and I'm not, this is more an observation, but it seems like there are some questions on this one as to the specific site selection and whether or not a living shoreline would be appropriate in this particular spot. Because obviously a cool project is really cool in theory, but if it's just gonna get inundated in like CSO contaminants, then
Right.
what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just.
Right.
Clearly the committee was comfortable that this was an appropriate location for this, regardless of how, because these are still relatively new, at least in my world. And like, I know that planners wanna go out and do some really cool projects, but they're comfortable that this site, it's not set up to fail, right?
That's what I think generally everybody was comfortable with, and the federal agencies really like this project a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as far as the future costs, are folks comfortable that whatever future costs might arise have been accounted for and agreed to be paid?
So, right, so they approved this budget. And that's where I think on-site visits are really helpful to talk to the applicant, and they are pretty much invested in this, and their match may increase, and they realize that. But they're really seeing this as like the Portsmouth, vision, and wanting, so I think they would be funding additional costs if needed.
Okay. Portsmouth budget is often in the news, so.
Oh, yeah, or for Peter Britz.
Yeah.
Do you know, during the site walk, does the city say, we've got this little project here, it looks small, it's a big expense, but it's a small area. Are they planning to sort of combine that with other projects in that area? It seems kind of isolated in a very urban
Right.
location relative to, some of the other parts of the North Pond.
Yeah, so I think it was ideal because they had some ownership. So
That's an important part of it.
Right, I know. So
They have the
I think
authority to
your
do work.
question's well taken. I don't recall.
Yeah, okay.
But there's nothing in the process that stops them from coming back to the ARM fund in the future and asking for more money to monitor this project, correct? Just that they may not get approved, but they could come back, could they not?
So for this project
Yeah,
alone.
yeah, like for
So-
like the extra money that it may cost if something comes up later on.
Right, so they're partnering with Northeastern University, and they are doing the monitoring. So those won't be additional costs that come back. I personally pretty much advise applicants that to come back for more money, the there needs to be monies advertised. 2, I have to get the committee and core and IRT's approval. I have to come back to you, and I may have to go back to GNC. So you get these budgets, nail these budgets down. They could come back for a second project,
That's what I mean.
or like what Lee's suggesting, maybe around, but I don't advocate for folks to come back to amend budgets.
Anyone else?
Okay, I move we fully fund the city enforcement $419,306 to improve degraded tidal shoreline through wetland restoration, wetland creation, and upland enhancement features, including stormwater improvements, and place deed restrictions on the parcel. The funding is contingent on receiving an NHDES wetlands permit that includes a sediment analysis and remediation plan if contaminant levels exceed acceptance limits, an approved planning plan, and a monitoring plan to address long-term success and adaptive management. It's a mouthful.
Sorry.
I'll second.
Second, Lee. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Excellent. Thank you. Now we're over in Barrington. It's another culvert restoration project, a culvert replacement. This is on the Oyster River. It's on Topaz Drive in Barrington. So if you drive Route 4, it's right off of Route 4, right a little bit before traffic circle. It's north of Route 4 into a residential housing park. So this is a site that has been before the committee here and the council in 2010 and in 2016. Both times they were not able to, like, costs would go up, or I think one year NRCS funding fell through. So third time's a charm on this one because it's a very high quality location. It's on the Oyster River, which is designated river, and it has American brook lamprey, American eel, brook trout, Blanding's turtles, spotted turtles, all in this area. As you know, the brook lamprey is a state endangered species. So with this replacement, we'll be opening up 5.2 miles for the species to spawn and to be in reconnected habitat. It's an existing, elliptical pipe that's perched over a foot, and they're proposing to replace it with a 30-foot wide open bottom steel bridge. So that's where the costs maybe, I can fend off some questions on that. That's a big cost for a bridge. They're asking $300,000 to replace it. It's, tier 1 habitat. It's connecting to conservation lands to the north, the Oyster River to the east, Lower Lamprey River to the south. If you're familiar with Connect the Coast, the Nature Conservancy's areas with high habitat values and connections, it's identified in that document, and also in the Coastal Watershed Conservation Plan. The Nature Conservancy is taking this one on. If you recall, they did the one in Newmarket, which was a tidal. This is a tidal, but they are targeting really high important locations on the landscape. So really excited with this.
Was the Nature Conservancy involved in the first two drives?
No, UNH was involved with the other
Gotcha.
the other one, and Trout Unlimited's on the last one.
Gotcha.
Yep.
No, you mean the
So
prior
those
ones
are-
on this, the prior applications?
Yeah,
on
it's
this?
just a question.
Yeah, those are like our
Just
3
wondering.
main, really strong partners.
Yep.
Anyone else on this one?
I move we fully fund the Nature Conservancy $300,000 to replace the Topaz Drive culvert over the Oyster River. The funding is contingent on receiving a New Hampshire DES wetlands permit that includes an approved monitoring plan to address measures for long-term success and adaptive management.
Second?
Second.
Second. Richard? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Great.
I hope we get it done this time.
Third time's a charm.
I
that's
think
what
we've seen this, as you said, we've seen.
Yes, I know. I have all good yay. So now we're over in Durham, the Southeast Land Trust is proposing to protect 37.4 acres on the designated wild and scenic Lamprey River. They're requesting $220,000 to protect this parcel that is on the frontage as a designated river. It's got other intermittent streams, 4 vernal pools, some valuable floodplain forest along the edge and surrounding sort of the lamprey. It's identified in multiple conservation plans. It is going to have benefits for their public water supply. So if you took the parcel line down to the river, their next adjacent parcel has the town or the UNH Town of Durham's pump station there. So super important for water supply protection. It's 91% is high ranked habitat by the Wildlife Action Plan, and multiple species will benefit: wood turtles, blanding turtles, alewife, sea lamprey. So there's a pasture, so it's a house that's going to be excluded near the road, Packers Falls Road, and there's a pasture that was associated with that parcel. So you'll see that there's some recommendations to limit cutting to just habitat management, wildlife habitat management, and Southeast Land Trust recognizes that is important. And there's an existing trail, but the committee also felt strongly that there should be no additional trails, as this does abut other lands that have been protected that have the ability for public to hike and walk on. I'm happy to answer your questions. It's a nice parcel, it's beautiful, the vernal pools were incredible, some interesting, plants, and nice frontage on the 1,230 feet of frontage on the lamprey.
Questions? I have a couple questions. So is the little blue dot the pump station?
Yes.
Okay. And so the black line, that's the part of the parcel that's being held out, is that where the house is?
Correct.
Okay. And so there's simply just a little spur right away kind of a thing that goes into this parcel, and the opposite side of the black line there must be another house or something?
Right, yep, exactly.
And were any of these adjacent parcels come before us before?
So, I'm sorry that it's small. There is, so if you recall, we've protected spruce wood forest through Trust for Public Lands. That was a $500,000 acquisition, funded project back in 2010, I'm gonna say. So that's like northeast of this parcel. We've done other Durham projects, the Walker and Lord, which Fish and Game I think helped with those. Those were through the nature.
But not these existing purple.
Not these
parcels.
exact ones
Okay.
that are abutting it, sorry.
Any other questions? Carol?
It's kind of an overall question about your conservation easements. And like for this one, it says, your easement's gonna say no cutting except for wildlife management. Do you have a clause like in the conservation easement language you use now that could change some of the language in the conservation easement in the future, so I know our legal person at Fish and Game had a problem with conservation easements that were so strict that if things change in the future, or say for instance this was inundated with invasive species, you would not be able to cut them based on this easement. Have you ever considered putting some type of flexible language in the easement to allow for something like that? Because what we see now, I mean, it says here, you know, no cutting except for wildlife management, but what if they come up with, you know, management of forests for fire protection in the future, you know? I know that our legal person hated conservation easements based because of that. He says it never envisions future progress or change.
Right, so the language does have sort of those clauses in terms of like acts of God, like you're talking about fire, and I think, you know, it is flexible for habitat management purposes.
Okay.
And it's one of those things that we as a group, we end up, I meet with the committee in a winter meeting, like, you know, January, so we can recap how did the grant round go, what can we use to do to change and make it better, and we often review that language to refresh, and then those deeds do get reviewed by the Attorney General's office. Right, so thank you. Good question.
Other questions?
Okay, I will move with, fully fund the Southeast Land Trust $220,000 for the fee ownership of the Pike property by the town of Durham with a conservation easement to be held by its Southeast Land Trust. The conservation easement will include required language from the NRCS Regional Conservation Partnership Program and the New Hampshire DES Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund. The easement shall include no cutting except for wildlife management practices, and trails should be limited to what currently exists on the property due to the sensitive aquatic features.
Second. Lee? Further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Thank you. Excellent. So we're on our last project. This is up in Milton, back up in Milton. The Stratford County Conservation District is requesting $97,000 to replace an undersized metal pipe culvert. So if you recall last grant round, we approved Tenerife Mountain through, you know, with the Moose Mountain Regional Greenways. And so this is upstream of Tenerife Mountain, this culvert location. And so it's upstream of that, and if you can picture that conservation parcel, it also included 2 culvert removals, full removals, for fish passage. So this is like the, you know, the next restriction up from Tenerife. And with the conservation lands, it's nice border connectivity for critters and fish. I know that picture is tough, especially black and white, but basically the outlet is like being hugged by a white pine's roots. It's like that bad. You can barely even see the culvert pipe. It's just over it. So this is a sore situation in the town. This road overtops in a 2-year storm event. So it washes a lot of sediment into the stream. So they're proposing to provide an open bottom structure. It's gonna be a 9-foot wide, 4-foot high by 36-foot long, clear span, you know, precast abutments, interlocking abutments with the deck. So not steel or anything, and that's why the prices are, you know, a little different. And yeah, a lot of a good opportunity for connectivity for turtles, salamanders, as well as fish. The town is providing some matching funds, and this one is being assisted by the Trout Unlimited.
2 quick questions. One, so approval is contingent on the town approval or permits.
Thank you. So, the someone, I think it was NRCS, was concerned about, so what they're using, and we just use this, you know, technique and structure. Matt, you might have some comments, but basically it's they're concrete blocks that lock as abutments, and so they're brought in, placed, locked, and then it's a concrete deck. And one of the federal partners was concerned with the suitability of that type of structure. This is it's, you know, a low traffic area, so that's why TU is going with that. But they really felt strongly that we need to make sure that the town is comfortable with that type of structure replacement.
What's the span on this?
9 feet. 9 feet wide, 4 feet high. So we just use this kind of technique up in on the BB River. So up in Campton, another TU, you know, and it's worked well, and it's more of a trafficked location than this one. So that's why the committee was like, okay, just make sure that the town is comfortable with this design.
And the town's provided match though, right? So that seems to indicate that
Right,
the town is supportive
right,
of it.
I know, so it's the best I can do. So I have like 15 people providing comments.
No, I'm just.
I know, so I think it was the best we could do to like satisfy that concern.
And my only other question would be, and I know that Jen Gilbert, we're in the same office, she's the floodplain
Right.
coordinator.
Oh, sure.
So I assume that if any of these structures are in floodplains, that they're getting their floodplain permits?
Right, and yes, exactly,
Okay.
and she was so helpful this grant round, pointing those out.
Okay, I just
Mhm.
would hate to have, sometimes that scheme is overlooked, so
Yeah.
I would be bereft of my duty to flag that on behalf of Jen.
Just confused about how this gets permitted. Wouldn't the town have to, this would be a town road? Is this a town easement? I mean, when they have a right of way and they have to sign the permit application anyway? So wouldn't that coordination have been done ahead of time with the town? I mean, I don't know who in the
I
town
know.
has to approve it, like, is it,
Yep.
like, obviously the town has to vote probably to have the money
Mhm.
included in the budget next
Right.
March or whatever, but
Yeah.
doesn't the town have to sign the application?
Yeah. So, yes,
Okay.
it is a circle. Like I said, I have like 15 people trying to
Yep.
get this, get a decision, so we made that suggestion, and they know it's a good project. It's like these are like headwaters areas that we
Yeah.
try to, focus people on. That was the way we could assure that that full circle
Got it, okay.
gets done.
I'm not suggesting it here, but if we saw something that, we've adjusted these in the past, so I'm not suggesting it, but.
Right.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Next one.
I move we fully fund the Stratford County Conservation District $97,000 to replace the Sam Plummer Road crossing over a tributary to Lyman Brook in Milton. Funding is contingent on approval of the new structure by the town and receiving a New Hampshire DES wetlands permit that includes an approved monitoring plan to address measures for long-term success and adaptive management.
Second.
Great.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Excellent, so I just wanna give you 2 announcements then. We will be running a grant round in 2022, so let your partners know, let folks know. It's looking like we'll have 6 of the 9 watersheds advertised, right? So, I can't remember what the total is, probably maybe close to 3 million. So we're gonna be busy.
Do you know your watersheds yet?
I do. You wanna know 'em?
Yes, please.
Okay, Penny, Winnie, So the Pemigewasset, Winnipesaukee, the Salmon Falls again, the Merrimack, the Lower Connecticut, the Kentucky, and the Upper Connecticut. I know, it's exciting. Merrimack, Deb has.
I wouldn't know.
I know, about 1.6 million.
Okay.
And then, I'm excited to announce that we have a position over at the Department of Personnel for a part-time staff person, to help me and Cheryl. So, yeah, thanks everyone.
Any other, on your biennial report, one comment I had was, when I looked at some of those tables, particularly the tables further on down, that seemed to be organized by the date of the project. It was hard to make any sense out of it, so I don't know whether, and I don't have a good suggestion as to which way to organize it, but I think maybe if it was organized by watershed or something, although I guess you've changed the watersheds.
Can I grab Steph's
Since then.
copy? I don't have my copy, sorry.
Oh.
I don't.
Did you have one?
Did we
You
have
have it?
No,
Oh,
we
you
don't
have
have
it?
I think Chip brought his in.
Oh,
I have it
Okay.
here.
Oh, sorry,
Well,
I
I have it.
wasn't prepared for that.
It's on this machine somewhere.
So the tables you're asking, which table is it, number?
I don't know, one of the last ones, somewhere, but
This one.
slide.
This is what?
Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you look at the tables, if you look at those tables, there may be some better way to organize them. I think they're organized chronologically by the date the money was received
Yeah.
in one of them, and it's like, well,
So we have to work closely with, our accounting, we have accounting with the Federal Army Corps as well, and then we have to sort of
Right.
get backup help from our accounting
Well-
office too, so I think we've got those, I guess if you wanna send me your,
Maybe
thoughts on how to reorganize, it's really
so that
tricky.
report you sent us is basically your biennial financial report then? Is that
And
right?
it goes to you folks as well as the,
Okay, so
fiscal.
that's under, I forget the statute, but there is a requirement for.
Yep.
Okay, so that really isn't something that's for our particular use then. It's in order to sort out money versus the fiscal years.
So we provide it to you for the reason, right?
Okay,
Great.
well, maybe that's not it's not appropriate to fill around that simply for us.
A quick question,
Sure.
these 6, grant runs you're gonna be having in the future, in 2022, approximately what time a year?
Oh, sure, so we'll advertise beginning of the year, the amount of funding. Pre-proposals are due at the end of April, like April 29th, and full are due August 31st.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, exciting.
Okay, anything else for?
Thanks everyone.
project.
Thank
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
yes, great
It's
work.
great to see all those restoration
Yeah.
projects
Yeah,
now.
I know.
When we
It's so
started out,
good.
there were almost none.
All
Right,
conservation.
yes,
I
exactly.
continue to complain.
So we're so
I
excited.
can't complain this time.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
I think it's a lot of, to do with, getting the word out and the tools that we have out there now, the restoration mapper, which I showed you a couple of months ago. So, thanks everyone.
And the new town, bringing in new partners.
I know.
That's so cool.
Thank you very much. All right, enjoy your day.
Okay, we still have to move on here.
I'm sorry. Thanks.
An update.
Hi, how's everyone holding up? So my name's Mary Ann Sultan. I think I know almost every one of you. I'm the Assistant Wetlands Bureau Administrator, and I'm happy to provide you with an update on the Wetlands Bureau activities. I'm going to focus on the annual report, fiscal year 2021. I believe it was emailed to you in October. So if you have that, if not, no worries. I'm just going to summarize it quickly, and if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. So first, the fiscal year 2021 It runs from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. And we've prepared this report as required to look at a summary of permit trends and activities. So if you look through it, it will look familiar. Our LR manager has done a great job in getting us to automate these so that we can be more timely in some of this reporting. And if you look at, you'll see it has application processing in terms of the numbers starting from by month, from July going through the fiscal year. So the total number of standard applications has remained steady between 2012 to 2019, and as I think we mentioned at the last reporting, there was a significant decrease in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic. In fiscal 2021, the numbers are coming up a little bit. They are approaching the 10-year average, but they're still less by an average of 100 below. So you should note that in terms of how that affects our funding and our activities. The seasonal variation chart, if you look at that, you'll see it's all pretty similar in terms of the graphics over the 10 years. It looks from 2012 to 2021. You'll see the spike in January when we get the utility SPNs. We've been getting those since that law was established, which is good. We do want the activity to take place in the winter. And it does peter off during the winter months. And as a bureau, we are within statutory timelines. You'll see that on page 5. By 97%, you'll note some of the exceptions are allowed by statute for after the facts, where work has been done without a permit. We are not bound by the statutory timelines there in case we need to do investigation or follow-up or may require some restoration. And also with emergency authorizations. So you'll see on page 6 the pie chart of our funding breakdown in terms of how we've been spending monies to maintain operations for the Wetlands Bureau. The majority is based on fees, almost by 70%. About almost half are wetland application fees, almost 20% shoreland fees, with the remaining expenses covered by the state general fund, 26%, and the 2 positions through the ARM Fund administrative assessment fee, 9%. And as you just heard, our mitigation coordinator, Lori Summer, announced that we will be posting a part-time position to support that program as well.
Marianne, on that one, I guess I wouldn't mind seeing, I guess, where the funding for this year relates to prior years, just in the future. Just
okay.
I know that you give us a lot of graphs, there's a ton of information. I just sort of wondered what was the budget last year.
So you'd like to see historic comparison?
Yeah.
Sounds good. We're always welcome to your suggestions. And some of us were dictated by counting.
I can't speak to that.
Yeah,
I'm not an acceptable accounting person.
I'm just saying from the commissioner's office, so some, just so you know, we do welcome your suggestions. If that's, especially given our current times, I think that's important. Any other questions so far, or comments or suggestions? So on page 7, there is a summary of initiatives. Some of these will be familiar to you, as you did hear Darlene Forrest did present to the council on the new dock registration program that's referenced under the first bullet, and the establishment of a new online tool for folks to register for existing docks, non-title maintenance. And there's a fact sheet that's referenced there as well. And we do have a reference to the reporting for the LBA audit that we regularly provide from 2019. And we've been making progress on that, looking at the SOPs with the LRM manager, who just started in January, has been reviewing all of the activities and SOPs, and making, good progress as we all review those together. We also have new reports, through our data analyst position that was hired this last year as well, which is funded through the general fund, and that position is focused on, looking at bureau activities in terms of permitting, consistency, workload assessments, dashboards, to see if there's any red flags, and when we do identify something, we've had some consistency exercises to make sure that we all understand where we've gone and where we're going and where we can make improvements. We also, with our business analyst group, has made great progress in making updates to the database. There were several things identified in the audit about our tracking in terms of appropriate supervisor, administrator sign-off, so we've established those. And there are changes in the works that are ready to be, I understand, to be released maybe this week even, on looking at waiver requests, amendment requests, and things like that. We've also had an EPA grant where we've looked specifically on impact tracking. How do we track loss and mitigation due to wetland permitting, and how we look at self-mitigating design. So we've actually had meetings almost every other week with all the permit supervisor on that topic, and we've seen database mock-ups, and those are getting ready to be made through a contract with our developer. Over this last year, we did also provide now 9 outreach events, even though we do not have a dedicated outreach position, looking at everything from federal versus state regulatory jurisdiction with the federal waters, navigable waters rule, floodplain management. I did one with Jen Gilbert. We did a 2-day one for DOT and wetland scientists on coastal science and regulatory changes, helping the public and consultants understand vulnerability assessments in the face of sea level rise. GIS tools and wetlands permit were provided at the New Hampshire Association Conservation Commissions last year, and there have been several outreach on mitigation.
Before we leave page 7, on the first bullet, in the last line, I think that's supposed to be the 2021, that outreach. The outreach for,
Yes, I think that looks right, yes.
okay. That's the outreach for the rules that were.
Yep. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay.
So the other thing I want to just let you know about a few other events since this report was developed. As you may have heard, we did have a lot of flooding in the southwest this year. July and August, the National Weather Service did indicate that it was a record for New Hampshire and the southwest in terms of the amount of flooding. And because they were 3 events in succession, the water tables and the soil remained very saturated, which compounded the washouts and road washouts, destabilization, culvert blockages, etc. The department issued over 70 emergency authorizations as a result of that event. There was a federal declaration as well, and that's just something that we're managing on top of all of what else we're doing in terms of permit workload. So I just thought you should be aware of that. There have also been, the technology group did also develop a culvert maintainer certification online tool, and we recently had an outreach event with UNHT Squared, and that was very well received, in addition to a construction notice that we have had online as well. We've had a number of vacancies that we're still actively trying to fill. I think we're getting ready to post one for the North Country permitting. If you know of anyone externally that may be interested in wetlands permitting position. As in September 2021, Steph Giulongo was promoted as our new inland wetland supervisor. And so she does manage all the inland regions, which is significant. And there are 2 vacancies, the North Country and her old region, which was this bright pink area here. So just want to make sure you knew about that. And we're actually real happy to have Steph. She has worked for a number of years with the Wetlands Bureau and with alteration of terrain, and has a Master of Engineering from UNH. We're also working on a new wetlands rules package and hope to have this ready for distribution this winter. And finally, as a result of an EPA grant, DES has worked with Ducks Unlimited, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we understand that the new NWI Plus maps are getting ready to be published to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service coming up near the end of November, and we're hoping that our data analyst can present that to you at maybe the December meeting. Let us know if that's possible on the NWI Plus maps, which are based on LiDAR and high resolution aerial photography. I'm happy to
I'd
answer.
say that's probably okay,
That
because
is
we don't
okay.
have a hearing.
Okay. Alright, that'll be great. Yes.
Can you give us any indication of what the programmatic general permit from the Corps might have for changes in the next permit period?
So that's a good question. We did have a meeting actually, I should have indicated that with the Corps, and that was on the agenda. We did ask them, when we're gonna see that. I had expected to see a draft already. I'm hoping that we will see a draft soon. So I'm not able to say. I do know that I did spend, I think, 3 to 4 days with Lindsay LaFave going through all of the rules changes in detail and comparing it to the general permit. So she's well aware of things, basically to make sure that they feel the federal process is catching everything consistent with their policy and rules to make sure that folks take advantage of the federal permit. Sorry, I can't give you any more details, but that's all I have right now. Okay. Hoping to give you an update in December. This will enable me to send her an email saying that you guys have asked about that.
Anything else? Or, I guess not. Okay. Next, remote meetings. We have a little, really a chat, actually some emails, with our attorney. We can have remote meetings, but we'd have to have a quorum here. So, I don't know whether we have to, and we also, of course, have to be prepared here, wherever here is, maybe it's the other room, that we were in before. But we have to be prepared to actually run that. So, I don't know whether we ever want to attempt that, or as we look toward winter. I mean, are we really gonna get the 6 people we would need here? And then have some other people who didn't have to drive so far or something. I'm not sure. And the other problem is that as we're getting toward coming to the meeting, we have to know what the quorum count was of people who could actually be here. And, if you're only gonna have 6 people show up, you gotta make sure that they're actually gonna be able to show up. So, it seems to me that it's a little bit too difficult to try to handle where we can't have the quorum separate.
Is the interest in this COVID related or job related?
I think the interest was just in general, it's job and travel time and everything. I think when we had the remote meetings, it was actually pretty nice just to be able to, walk out of the door to let everybody do whatever it was, and go back to cutting trees or whatever. So, and I'm sure the same thing for you people, to be able to go back or, go right back to your work instead of having to work over here, so.
We've had a lot of conversations about this just in the local land use board world.
Yeah.
And I think that the option for remote meetings really increased participation at all levels.
I agree.
Now I get that
there was talk about that, I don't know what happened to that. Still-
There's pending.
Yeah, it's still, I think it's carried over. Maybe they'll do something that would allow the tough part is the quorum part. Because otherwise, you could have your equipment and you know you're gonna do it, and then you just announce it, and make sure you announce how to access the meeting remotely.
So how is it different now? I mean, you did do that for
Oh, because
all
that, we
2020.
did that under the emergency authorization that ended in June.
But I think we had one after that.
Well, that was,
Because I
it was a day or two.
Because I know these two were in their
Yeah.
homes, and we were here.
And it says there are constraints. I mean, I remember there was a lag on my end. I mean,
Sure.
it's not the same as being in person.
Right.
I guess I would be a proponent of trying to figure out if it's something that we can do for the winter meetings.
I would agree.
Well,
Me
I guess
too.
we'll have to, first thing would be to see what we, you know, is the equipment always set up?
Right, I run meetings for the city, which doesn't have the commuting issues, but, you know, we have to do that, we just have to check and make sure we're gonna have a quorum, like as the person running the meeting. And so, you know, there are those like extra steps, but it is feasible and we've increased participation for sure.
Yeah, Second New Hampshire
Yeah.
Planning is doing it too, that way.
Yeah.
You just have to have a
Well, you have to,
quorum.
part of this was prompted by something that happened in my town where they had this meeting, and then they allowed other people to come in by Zoom, but they never noticed that you could do that.
Do that, yeah.
And so then that just prompted kind of questions about what the way to, so you have to notice it, you have to notice that people could come in. And that means you have to be prepared, and then if you've noticed it, that you have to be able to do it.
So to be honest, and I just follow what our legal folks tell me, but we only let the board members or people invited by the group participate remotely. Anyone coming to participate, like from the public, still needs to be physically present. That's what our lawyers are telling me.
Oh, well, hopefully they're consistent with other lawyers.
Yeah.
So that was just the only comment. So I guess maybe if you could do a little research and see if it's there. I mean, I did discuss with Gloria through email about having the projections here, and basically it would have been a little bit of hassle for her to try to get that set up, and it seemed like we could go with it without it. And I think from the comments that we had, there were only a couple that were too hard to see because they were small. It was mostly we could have used a little bit more information. So. Okay, so that was that item. Old business, wetlands rules, wetlands council rules. I already let the cat a little bit out of the bag, but this, which I'm sure you're all aware of, and you don't have one. This is the rules on rules. This little pamphlet. And you know, you start here and you go down there, and we are down here. So we're somewhere down here.
Is it a 2-page flow chart or is there?
Yeah, it's a two-page flow chart.
Rest of the
So, as I said, we are on the consent calendar for the 18th, and actually based on Pam's comment, I'm not sure that our attorney even realizes that perhaps that they only sent the to me. So we'll see what
That's
happens.
November.
November 18th. We did not get the submission done by September 30th. We had a couple days. So they go month to month. You have to begin by the end of the month to go to the next month. So that's where we are. So that sounds good. We see what happens, then we just come in and adopt it. And we process. So our next meeting, which I think is the next thing, is December 14th, unless, as you heard Pam say, we discover that